Hey everyone, welcome back for lesson 3 of Unit 7. So, what we're building on today is moving forward from the context that was established for how World War II began in the first lesson with the video. Then, for going a little bit deeper on that topic with the specific causes from totalitarianism to see what were the ideas of totalitarianism and how did they stand in contrast to American democracy. And so we're inching closer to what's going on in America regarding the beginning of World War II. That stuff was also integrated into the video you had in lesson 1. So essentially what we're setting up today is the idea of how did the war begin in 1939, but the US didn't get involved until the very end of 1941. So we're looking at that topic today to understand why did the US take so long and what were the different perspectives that existed as to what kept us out. All right, so our essential questions for today, there are 2 of them. One is number 3, saying how did the US federal government respond to this crisis? So World War II had begun, and so our government had to decide what will our foreign policy response be. Will we jump in and support our allies like Britain, who was our ally? Or are we going to stay out of it and stay isolationist as we had been since the end of World War I? That was kind of our policy going on, right? So this crisis will eventually affect us. Our government understood that they had to have a policy towards the war in order for moving forward, whether that was joining or not. Second essential question, what were the diverse perspectives on the government's response to this national crisis? How and why did people have contrasting ideas? So, ultimately, the government decided to stay out of the war for the first 2 years, but within those 2 years, there are very opposite ideas on whether the government was making the right idea. There were people called isolationists that said the US should stay isolated and out of the war, so they agreed with staying out. There were people called interventionists that wanted us to join the war and get more and more involved and helpful towards democracies like Britain. You're going to find in this lesson that the US changed its policy over time. So it wasn't quite like it was neutral and isolated one day, and then suddenly it was just like we joined the war. There's a bit of a gradual way of intervening that you're going to see evident through the primary sources that you will be seeing. In order to consider those primary sources, your key skill today is corroboration. The reason it's corroboration is because you're going to see perspectives from different points of views, right? So you need to understand how those 2 points of view, isolationism and interventionism, are different from each other, but also within the sources you view, how one person that you would say is an isolationist is still saying, well, we should intervene a little bit, to understand those mild differences that changed across time from the government's perspective. I realize in retrospect that the worksheet I made you, the questions to go with this, corroboration isn't anywhere on there, but the way you can consider this skill is that as you go through the sources, time is progressing, and how does the government's perspective shift over time? And how do they match up or disagree? So that is the corroboration as you move through the sources. Our key concepts for the content is that the US maintained a policy of neutrality and isolationism in foreign affairs between the end of World War I and well into World War II. So World War II was going on for 2 years before the US actually entered it formally. We were, saying we were neutral since it began to when we got involved. And lastly, the US struggled to maintain neutrality as their traditional allies were steadily defeated by Nazi Germany, leading to a debate over future intervention in World War II. And you can see how that ties into the multiple perspectives we're considering today. All right, so let's head over to Google Classroom, show you what's up. So this is 1, 2, 3 right there. So here's your copy. You're going to open that up. And what we've got at the beginning is the worksheet with all your questions. So what I've included at the top, kind of like in the lesson about totalitarianism, is a couple definitions that you can use to work with so that when you read the sources, you can reference back to say, okay, this person says this. Does that fit with more an isolationist point of view or an interventionist point of view? Many of the questions align to you deciding that before moving forward. So you're going to consider 1, 2, documents. Basically, for the first two documents, one is isolationist, one is interventionist. I want you to be able to understand the arguments that both sides were making throughout this debate. All right, so read the definitions, establish which is which there so you understand what they're trying to say. And then when you get to the second box, I have it separated because documents C, D, E, and F are all by the same author, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, same dude from the Great Depression and the New Deal, still president during World War II, pretty much all the way through it. And he's giving various speeches at different steps of the war that are going to express an isolationist point of view, an interventionist point of view, and then a couple things in between. So what I want you to reflect on as you're going here is, first of all, saying, who's this author? It's the same dude for all of them. You just need to do it once. The context, so what is occurring in the war in Europe? What had changed since the previous document? So in document C, what was going on in World War II? By the time you get to document D, look at the date, look at the source line, and say, what had changed in the war again and again? So you can see as the context changes, so might FDR's point of view of being isolationist or interventionist, right? Think of it as a spectrum, by the way, so not like full isolation or full intervention, but that we should stay isolated in this way, but intervene in this way. So it's a bit of a balance and it's going to change over time. You're just categorizing each document here as isolationist, interventionist. What does he seem to believe based on his words? And then providing those words a quotation that demonstrate the claim that you put on the left. Question at the bottom here is something that kind of ties into your ultimate axes paragraph for this unit of, did the government make the right decision about how it responded to the crisis? So you're going to practice with this essential question. Did the U.S. federal government make the right choice to join World War II after the Pearl Harbor attack? Should they have joined sooner, or should they have remained neutral? Choose one of these options and explain, because the point at which we choose to enter the war can ultimately act in your eventual axis paragraph as a way that you say, I agree with what the government did, or the government made the wrong decision because they entered the war at the wrong time. All right, so then there's all the documents. Remember, you've got the document itself, the title of it, and the source line gives you some context about what was going on at the time and information on the author. Yes, that is Dr. Seuss. You'll get to it when you get to it. And then FDR, 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 FDR. All right, let's look back at our directions before we finish up. So remember, how is the government choosing to respond to the fact that World War II had begun? And what were the different perspectives on the decision the government had made? Perspectives of the authors, isolationists, interventionists, how they're different from each other. And then the concepts is we were neutral, but we struggled with that neutrality. And you'll see that struggle playing out in the fact that not all the documents corroborate perfectly with each other. There's nuance and slight differences to the points of view along the way. All right, folks, that's it for the directions here. So you'll see me next time. Until then, bye.